the afternoon sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of Greystone Mansion's bridal suite should have felt like a blessing. Instead, it felt like an interrogation lamp, exposing every crack in the perfect facade I'd spent 6 months building. 28 years old, and I was about to marry a man who'd proposed on our third date because it made sense for his career trajectory. I stared at my reflection in the antique mirror, blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo beneath a tiara that cost more than most people's cars, custom Vera Wang gown that fit like it had been painted onto my body, makeup applied by the same artist who did the Kardashians. I looked perfect. I looked like a stranger. My phone buzzed on the vanity, and I reached for it with hands that trembled slightly. Probably Priscilla, my maid of honor, checking if I needed anything before the ceremony. Or my mother making sure I hadn't smudged my lipstick. Or Brandon sending some last-minute romantic text about how he couldn't wait to see me walking down the aisle. The message that lit up my screen wasn't from any of them. Brandon, I can't do this. I'm sorry. Don't look for me. I read it once. Twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. My vision tunneled, the edges of the room going dark and fuzzy like someone was slowly turning down the lights. 300 guests waited in the garden below. Beverly Hills elite. Instagram influencers who'd posted about my wedding for weeks. My mother's entire social circle who'd been gossiping about this union since the moment Brandon proposed. The mayor was out there. 2 reality TV stars. A former governor. And my fiancé had just dumped me via text message. Avery. Priscilla's voice came from the doorway, bright and oblivious. Oh my God, you look absolutely stunning. Are you ready? Everyone's. She stopped when she saw my face. What's wrong? You're white as a sheet. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process that this was actually happening. I held up my phone with a hand that shook so badly the screen blurred. Priscilla snatched it from me, her eyes scanning the message. The color drained from her perfectly bronzed face. No. No, this is a joke. This has to be Brandon's idea of pre-wedding jitters humor. He wouldn't. He's gone, I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. He's not here. Fuck. Priscilla grabbed my shoulders, her acrylic nails digging into my bare skin. Okay. Okay, we can spin this. We can say you got sick. Food poisoning. We'll reschedule. There are 300 people out there, I whispered. My mother invited 300 people. Through the window I could see them. Rows of white chairs arranged in perfect symmetry across the manicured lawn. Flower arrangements that cost more than my car. A string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. And standing at the altar, the officiant checking his watch with increasing concern. That's when I saw him. A man I didn't recognize, standing in the shadows near the garden's edge where the sunlight couldn't quite reach. Dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by an artist who understood both beauty and cruelty. He wore an immaculate white suit that probably cost more than my dress, and even from this distance I could see his eyes. Amber. Almost glowing in the indirect light. Inhuman. He was staring directly at me. Our gazes locked and something primal slithered down my spine. Recognition. Terror. Desire. Like every warning your body screams when you're standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing one step forward means falling forever. I didn't know him. I'd never seen him before in my life. So why did it feel like he'd been waiting for me? What would you do if your entire life shattered in a single text message? If everyone you loved was about to watch you fall apart? I stood there in that bridal suite, hearing my mother's voice echoing up the stairs. Avery, darling, it's time. And I knew that walking down that aisle would destroy me. But what I didn't know was that the man waiting in the shadows was far more dangerous than public humiliation. That he'd been hunting me for months, waiting for exactly this moment of weakness to make his move. that once I accepted his offer there would be no going back to the world I knew. If you want to know what happened when I made the choice that changed everything, when I put my hand in the Vampire King's and let him lead me into eternal darkness, then you need to stay with me. Because what comes next, it's not a fairy tale. It's something far more dangerous. And far more intoxicating. I have to tell them, I said numbly. I have to go down there and tell them he's not coming. Absolutely not. Priscilla's voice went sharp with panic. Avery, think about this. The humiliation, the social media nightmare. It's already a nightmare. I moved toward the door on legs that felt disconnected from my body. At least if I tell them myself, I control the narrative. The walk down the grand staircase felt like descending into hell. Each step brought me closer to the moment that would define me forever. Not as Avery Summers, successful event planner. Not as the girl who made everyone else's dreams come true. But as the woman who got dumped at the altar in front of half of Beverly Hills. The murmur of 300 voices died the moment I appeared at the garden entrance. Alone. No wedding march. No proud father to give me away. Just me in my ridiculous white dress, feeling like a ghost haunting my own funeral. My mother stood up from the front row, her face already crumpling with understanding. Avery, sweetheart. Brandon isn't coming. My voice carried across the sudden, terrible silence. Someone gasped. A phone camera flashed. This moment would be on Instagram in seconds. I'm sorry you all came for nothing. The wedding there is no wedding. The whispers started immediately. Pitying looks. Shocked stares. Someone laughed, actually laughed, and I wanted to die right there on the perfectly manicured grass. That's when he moved. The stranger in white stepped out of the shadows, walking toward me with a grace that didn't look quite human. People turned to stare at him, their whispers shifting from pity for me to curiosity about this impossibly beautiful man who moved through the crowd like he owned it. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the inhuman perfection of his features. No one was that beautiful. No one's eyes actually glowed like molten gold. No one radiated the kind of dark magnetism that made every person in the garden lean slightly toward him, drawn by instinct to something powerful and predatory. Avery Summers, he said, and his voice was smoke and silk and centuries-old wine. I'm Lorenzo Di Maria. And I'd like to make you an offer. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process what was happening. I don't know you. Not yet. A smile curved his perfect lips, revealing teeth that were just slightly too white, too sharp. But you will. Your fiancé abandoned you. Left you here to face this humiliation alone. I'm offering you an alternative. What kind of alternative? His amber eyes held mine, and I felt like I was falling into them, drowning in molten gold. Marry me instead. The garden erupted in shocked gasps. My mother made a sound like a wounded bird. Priscilla grabbed my arm, whispering urgently, Avery, who the hell is this guy? But I couldn't look away from Lorenzo Di Maria. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think beyond the terrifying certainty that this moment would change everything. You're insane, I whispered. I don't even know you. You know enough. He extended his hand, palm up, an invitation and a challenge. You know that if you send these people home now, you'll be the joke of Beverly Hills for the next decade. Every event you plan, every client you meet will remember you as the woman who got dumped at the altar. Or... His smile widened, predatory and beautiful. You can take my hand, walk down that aisle with me, and show them all that Avery Summers is not so easily discarded. It was insane. Completely, utterly insane. Marry a stranger to save face? That was something from a romance novel, not real life. But standing there in my wedding dress, feeling 300 pairs of eyes on me, watching my mother's horrified face and Priscilla's panic and the barely concealed schadenfreude of people I'd called friends, I realized I had nothing left to lose. I placed my hand in Lorenzo Di Maria's. His fingers closed around mine, cool and strong, and that primal recognition flared again. Like touching him completed some circuit I hadn't known was open. Like fate clicking into place. "Well then," he said softly, for my ears only. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget." The officiant stared at us like we'd both lost our minds. "I'm sorry, but you can't just." "Can't I?" Lorenzo's voice carried an edge that made the elderly man flinch. "I believe Miss Summers is in need of a groom, and I'm offering my services. Unless you'd prefer she suffer this humiliation alone." Something passed between them. A look I couldn't quite read. Then the officiant's expression went blank, compliant, like someone had flipped a switch in his brain. "Of course, Mr. Di Maria. If the bride consents." Every instinct screamed at me to run. This was insane. I didn't know this man. Didn't know anything about him except that he moved like a predator and looked at me like I was something he'd been hunting for a very long time. But 300 people were staring at me. My mother's face had gone from grief to confusion to something like desperate hope. And somewhere out there, Brandon was probably congratulating himself on his escape, never thinking I'd actually go through with the wedding. "I consent," I heard myself say. Lorenzo's smile was devastating. He tucked my hand into the crook of his arm and led me down the aisle like we'd rehearsed this 1,000 times. His touch sent electricity racing through my skin. Too cold, too intense, nothing like Brandon's careful, measured affection. The ceremony passed in a blur. I spoke my vows to a stranger while my brain screamed questions I couldn't voice. Who was he? Why was he doing this? And why did his eyes keep catching the light wrong, flashing amber gold like an animal's in the dark? When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Lorenzo cupped my face with hands that felt like marble. Beautiful, cold, impossibly strong. His kiss was gentle, almost chaste, but I felt the sharp edge of teeth against my lower lip. A warning. A promise. The crowd erupted in applause. Whether from genuine happiness or sheer shock, I couldn't tell. The reception that followed felt like a fever dream. Lorenzo moved through the crowd with supernatural charisma, charming my mother, reassuring skeptical guests, handling questions about our whirlwind romance with practiced ease. People who should have been horrified were instead enchanted. Even Priscilla, who'd pulled me aside hissing, "What the actual hell, Avery?" melted when Lorenzo turned his attention to her. "He's incredible," she breathed, watching him chat with the mayor. "Where did you find him?" "I didn't," I said numbly. "He found me." 3 hours later, I found myself in Lorenzo's car, a sleek black vehicle that probably cost more than my yearly salary, leaving Greystone Mansion behind. My wedding dress rustled against leather seats. My new husband sat beside me, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance. "We should talk," I said finally, as Beverly Hills blurred past the tinted windows. The car was moving too fast. Way too fast. But when I glanced at the speedometer, it read a reasonable 45. "Yes, we should." Lorenzo's voice was different now. Colder. The charm he'd displayed for the guests had evaporated, leaving something ancient and dangerous in its place. "But not here. Wait until we reach the estate." "The estate?" "My home. Your home now, I suppose. Though this marriage is an arrangement, Avery. Protection in exchange for your cooperation. Nothing more." The words hit me like ice water. Protection from what? He didn't answer. Just turned those amber eyes on me, and I saw something flicker in their depths. Hunger. Regret. Something that looked almost like pity. The car pulled through massive iron gates into a property that belonged in a Gothic novel. The mansion loomed against the darkening sky, all modern glass and ancient stone, somehow both contemporary Beverly Hills and old-world European. It shouldn't have worked. It did. Lorenzo led me inside without a word. His hand on my lower back felt possessive, proprietary, like he owned me now. Maybe he did. I'd put my hand in his, said my vows, signed whatever documents the officiant had produced. I'd married a complete stranger to save my pride. The interior was breathtaking. Soaring ceilings, artwork that looked museum quality, furniture that screamed old money and older secrets. And cold. Everything was so cold. Sit, Lorenzo commanded, gesturing to a leather sofa in what appeared to be his study. When I hesitated, his expression softened slightly. Please. I sat. Watched as he moved to a sideboard and poured amber liquid into crystal glasses. His movements were too fluid, too fast. Like watching a film with frames missing. Your fiancé didn't abandon you because he stopped loving you, Lorenzo said without preamble. He handed me a glass but didn't sit. Brandon Wright was compelled to leave. By men who wanted to hurt me. Compelled. My laugh sounded hysterical. You make it sound like mind control. Exactly like mind control. Lorenzo's eyes caught the firelight, reflecting gold like an animal's. The Crimson Brotherhood. Vampire hunters who've been tracking me for months. They discovered you were planning a very public wedding and saw an opportunity. Use you as bait to draw me into the open. Vampire hunters. I set down my untouched glass with shaking hands. You're telling me vampire hunters made Brandon dump me? To get to you? A vampire? Yes. He moved then. 1 second he was across the room, the next he was standing directly in front of me. No footsteps. No sound. Just impossible, terrifying speed that made my hindbrain scream predator. I've been watching you for 6 months, Avery Summers, Lorenzo said softly. His hand came up to trace my jawline with fingers that felt like cool marble. Watching you create perfect moments for other people while your own life fell apart around you. Watching that fool Brandon take you for granted. Watching you diminish yourself to fit into his mediocre world. You're insane. But I couldn't move. Couldn't pull away from his touch. Am I? His smile revealed teeth too sharp to be human. Fangs. Tell me you haven't felt it. The recognition. Like you've been waiting for me your entire life. He was right. God help me, he was right. Standing this close to Lorenzo Di Maria felt like coming home to a house I'd never seen before but somehow always known existed. The hunters will come for you now, Lorenzo continued, stepping back and giving me space to breathe. Being seen with me, marrying me publicly, you're marked. They'll use you to hurt me or they'll kill you to send a message. Your only protection is staying by my side. Becoming my wife in truth, not just on paper. And if I refuse? Then I'll provide you with security, money, a new identity in another state. And you'll spend the rest of your life running from men who want you dead because you were unfortunate enough to catch my attention. His expression was unreadable. Or you can stay. Give me 1 night to prove I can keep you safe. Tomorrow morning you decide, stay and embrace this new life, or run and hope they never find you. I should have run right then. Should have called the police, my mother, anyone. This man, this creature, had just admitted to stalking me for months, admitted to being something that shouldn't exist. But standing in that cold, beautiful house, wearing a wedding dress meant for another man, I realized I had nowhere to run to. Brandon had destroyed my old life. The hunters Lorenzo described had already marked me for death. And somewhere beneath the terror, beneath the shock, I felt that primal recognition singing in my blood. I was already his. I'd been his since the moment our eyes locked across a garden full of strangers. 1 night, I whispered. Tomorrow I decide. Lorenzo's smile was sharp enough to cut. 1 night, Mrs. Di Maria. Make it count. I woke in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud made of silk and money. For a disorienting moment, I thought yesterday had been a nightmare. Then I saw the wedding dress draped over a velvet chair, the diamond ring heavy on my finger, and reality came crashing back. I'd married a vampire. The bedroom was obscenely luxurious, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Beverly Hills, artwork that probably belonged in the Getty, a bathroom bigger than my old apartment. A note sat on the nightstand in elegant script: "Join me for breakfast when you're ready. First door on the left. L." 20 minutes later, showered and dressed in clothes that had mysteriously appeared in the closet in exactly my size, I found my way downstairs. The breakfast room was flooded with morning light, and Lorenzo sat at the head of a long table, reading a tablet with the focused intensity of someone reviewing battle plans. He looked up when I entered, and something flickered in those amber eyes. Appreciation, maybe. Or hunger. "You slept well?" His voice was formally polite, like we were business associates, not newlyweds. "Surprisingly, yes." I took the seat across from him, eyeing the spread of food that appeared courtesy of a woman who materialized from nowhere. Late 50s, kind face, completely unbothered by the supernatural situation. "Thank you, Lucia." The housekeeper smiled. "Of course, Mrs. Di Maria. It's lovely to finally meet you properly. Lorenzo's been quite preoccupied with your safety." "Lucia." Lorenzo's tone carried a warning. "I'm just saying, in 50 years of service, I've never seen you so invested in." "Lucia." She left, but not before giving me a conspiratorial wink that suggested she knew far more than she was saying. Before I could ask what that meant, 2 more people entered. A woman who moved with predatory grace, dark hair and colder eyes, scanned me like a threat assessment. Behind her, a man built like a warrior from ancient Rome, scarred and deadly and watching everything with preternatural stillness. "Avery, this is Veronica, my senior advisor, and Felix, head of security." Lorenzo's introduction was clinical. "They'll be instrumental in keeping you alive." "Charmed," Veronica said in a tone that suggested she was anything but. "Though I still think bringing a human into our world is reckless at best, suicidal at worst." "Your objection is noted." Lorenzo's voice went arctic. "And dismissed. Avery is under my protection. Anyone who challenges that challenges me." The threat hung in the air like a blade. Veronica's jaw tightened, but she nodded and retreated. Felix simply inclined his head with what might have been respect before following. "They don't approve," I said once we were alone again. "They don't have to." Lorenzo stood, offering his hand. "Come. If you're staying even one more day, there are things you need to learn. Starting with how to survive a room full of vampires who'll be watching for any sign of weakness." The next hours passed in a blur of impossible information. Lorenzo walked me through his world with the patience of a professor and the precision of a general. Vampire hierarchy. Political alliances that stretched back centuries. The subtle differences between turned vampires and those born to the bloodline. How to recognize supernatural creatures by the way they moved, the way light caught their eyes. "There's a gala in 3 days," he explained as we moved through the mansion's ballroom, a space that looked like something from Versailles. "Every major vampire coven on the West Coast will attend. They'll want to see my new wife. Judge whether you're worthy. And if they decide I'm not, they won't live to share that opinion." He said it so casually, like discussing the weather. "But it would be easier if you could dance." Before I could protest, his hand was on my waist, the other capturing mine. A waltz began playing from hidden speakers, and Lorenzo pulled me into the steps with fluid grace that made me stumble. "Relax," he murmured, his breath cool against my ear. "Feel the rhythm. Let me lead." We danced, and with each step I felt the distance between us shrinking. His hand on my waist burned despite the cold of his skin. When I looked up, his eyes had darkened to molten amber, fixed on my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You're 500 years old," I whispered, remembering what he'd told me. "You built your kingdom during the gold rush. You've seen empires rise and fall. Why me?" "Because," he said softly, pulling me closer, "in 5 centuries I've never met anyone who looked at the world the way you do. Like it's full of possibility instead of prey. Like beauty matters more than power. His thumb traced circles on my waist. You make me remember what it was like to be human. The moment shattered when Lucia appeared in the doorway, her expression tight with concern. Sir, there's someone at the gate. He says he's Mrs. Di Maria's fiancé. Brandon. I found him in the foyer 10 minutes later, looking rumpled and desperate in yesterday's clothes. When he saw me, relief flooded his face. Avery, thank God. I've been trying to call you, but your phone's off. We need to talk about yesterday. There's nothing to talk about. My voice came out colder than I expected. Stronger. You left me at the altar via text message. We're done. I was confused. The stress, the pressure. He stepped forward, reaching for me, and I saw it clearly for the first time. The weakness. The selfishness. How had I ever thought this man was my future? She said, you're done. Lorenzo appeared beside me, his presence radiating controlled violence. I suggest you leave before I make you. Brandon's face twisted with anger and fear. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, Avery. He's not human. He's a monster who'll turn you into something. She knows exactly what I am. Lorenzo's voice dropped to a growl. And she's still here. Still wearing my ring. Still mine. Now get off my property before I forget I promised her I'd be civilized. Brandon fled. I should have felt something, sadness, regret, anything. Instead, I felt free. That night, everything changed. We were in Lorenzo's study when Felix burst in, blood streaming from a wound on his shoulder. Hunter Scout. Breached the perimeter. I neutralized him, but he swayed, the injury worse than he'd admitted. Lorenzo moved to help him, and that's when I saw it. The second hunter, emerging from shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide anyone. The crossbow bolt aimed directly at Lorenzo's back. I screamed a warning. Lorenzo spun with inhuman speed, but not fast enough. The bolt caught him in the side and he went down hard, gasping. Holy water, I realized with horror. The bolt had been coated in holy water. Lorenzo. I dropped beside him, my hands hovering uselessly over the wound. Smoke rose from where the blessed liquid ate into his flesh. I'll heal, he gritted out. But slowly. Too slowly if more hunters come. Without thinking, I pulled at my collar, baring my throat. Then take what you need. My blood. Take it. His eyes went wide with shock, then hunger. Avery, you don't understand what you're offering. I understand you'll die without it. So take it. Now. Lorenzo's control shattered. He pulled me onto his lap with desperate strength, one hand cradling my head as his fangs descended. This will change things between us, he warned. The blood bond. I don't care. His fangs pierced my throat and pain exploded through me, sharp, bright, terrible. Then it transformed into something else. Pleasure so intense it bordered on agony, connection so deep it felt like our souls were bleeding into each other. I could feel his hunger, his centuries of loneliness, his desperate need not just for blood but for connection. For me. When he finally pulled away, his wound was healing. But we were both shaking. What have we done? I whispered. Lorenzo's eyes blazed gold as he pulled me closer. Started something that can't be stopped. The gala was a nightmare dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos. I stood in the ballroom wearing Valentino, blood red because Lorenzo said it would send a message, surrounded by creatures that looked human but moved wrong. Too graceful. Too still. Eyes that tracked movement with predatory focus. Smile, Lorenzo murmured beside me, his hand possessive on my waist. They're watching for weakness. They were definitely watching. A blonde vampire who introduced herself as Isabeau circled me like I was prey, her smile showing too many teeth. How charming. The king takes a human bride. Tell me, little mortal, what makes you think you can survive our world? The same thing that makes you think you can question my husband's choices without consequences." The words came out sharper than intended, and I felt Lorenzo's approval through the strange connection that had formed between us since he'd tasted my blood. Isabeau's eyes flashed with annoyance, but before she could respond, an older vampire stepped forward. He looked Middle Eastern, ancient power rolling off him in waves. "I am Rashid, coven leader of the Southern Territories. Your wife has spirit, Lorenzo. But spirit doesn't make her worthy of standing beside the Vampire King." The room went silent. This was a direct challenge. Lorenzo's grip on me tightened fractionally. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "Avery is mine. My wife. My choice. Anyone who questions her worthiness questions me." His amber eyes swept the assembled vampires. "I invite you to make that challenge. Please." No one moved. The threat was clear enough. The tension broke when servants began circulating with blood-red wine. I knew it wasn't wine. Tried not to think about where they'd sourced it. Around me, vampires laughed and schemed, their politics Byzantine and deadly. I was navigating a world where one wrong word could mean death. Then the screaming started. The French doors exploded inward, and men in black tactical gear poured through. Hunters. Dozens of them, armed with crossbows, stakes, weapons that glowed with holy symbols. Vampires fell, shrieking as blessed weapons found their marks. "Avery, run!" Lorenzo shoved me toward the exit, but I watched in horror as a hunter drove a stake through Isabeau's heart. She crumbled to ash before she hit the ground. "Give us the Vampire King." A man stepped through the carnage, older, wearing a priest's collar beneath his tactical vest. His eyes found me across the chaos. "Give us Lorenzo Di Maria, and we'll let the mortal live." "Father Nathaniel Cross," Lorenzo snarled beside me. "Should have killed you in Prague." "Should have," Cross agreed. "But you were always too sentimental. Even for a monster." He gestured, and a dozen crossbows aimed at Lorenzo. "Your wife goes free. You come with us." Simple exchange. "No." The word tore from my throat. "No, you can't." Lorenzo moved with impossible speed, cutting through hunters like they were paper. But there were too many. Holy water splashed across his skin, burning. Blessed blades cut deep. I watched the strongest creature I'd ever known brought to his knees by sheer numbers. A dropped sword lay 3 feet from me. I grabbed it without thinking, the weight unfamiliar in my hands. A hunter turned toward me, raising his crossbow, and instinct took over. I drove the blade forward with strength I shouldn't have possessed, feeling it punch through Kevlar and flesh. The hunter fell. I stared at my blood-covered hands, shaking. "Avery, no." Lorenzo's voice, desperate. But I was already moving toward him, toward the circle of hunters that surrounded him. Cross stepped in front of me, amused. "Brave. Foolish but brave. You can't save him, child. Watch me." Lorenzo looked up at me, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. "Don't. They'll kill you. Then we die together." I dropped to my knees beside him, baring my throat. "Take what you need. All of it. Everything I have. Take it and end them. The blood bond, Avery, it will change you." "I don't care." My scream echoed through the ballroom. "I am not watching you die." His fangs sank into my throat, and this time was different. Power exploded between us. Golden light that sent hunters stumbling back, connections so deep I could feel his memories bleeding into mine. 500 years of loneliness. Watching me plan other people's weddings while slowly falling in love with someone he thought he could never have. Orchestrating our meeting not out of strategy but desperate hope. "You were never bait," I heard his voice in my mind and in the air simultaneously. "I chose you 6 months ago. Chose you and couldn't stay away. You were always meant to be mine." The light intensified. My body felt like it was being rewritten at a cellular level. Faster. Stronger. I could hear heartbeats from across the room, smell fear and blood and death. When I opened my eyes, the world had shifted into hyperfocus. Together we moved. Lorenzo's speed combined with my newfound strength. We tore through hunters like avenging angels, unstoppable and terrible. Cross tried to run, but I was suddenly in front of him, moving faster than thought. My hand closed around his throat with crushing force. "You made a mistake," I said, and my voice sounded different. Deeper. Dangerous. "You threatened what's mine." Lorenzo appeared beside me, his hand covering mine on Cross's throat. Together. Together. We ended him. When the last hunter fell, silence descended. The surviving vampires stared at us, at me, with something like awe. Or terror. I couldn't tell which. Lorenzo pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "What have we done to you?" I could feel it. The changes racing through me. Not quite vampire. Not quite human anymore. Something in between. Something new. The moment Lorenzo's fangs pierced my throat, everything I thought I knew about myself shattered. The pain, the pleasure, the absolute terror of feeling his ancient power flowing into me while my mortality drained away. It should have been the worst moment of my life. Instead, it was the first time I'd ever felt truly alive. But the blood bond doesn't just connect us. It's changing me in ways I don't understand yet, giving me abilities that no human should possess, marking me as his in a world where that makes me the biggest target in California. The hunters aren't done with us. The vampire covens are circling like sharks. And somewhere deep inside, I can feel myself becoming something other. Something powerful. Something that terrifies me as much as it thrills me. If you want to witness my transformation, to see what happens when a mortal woman becomes the vampire king's greatest weapon and his most dangerous vulnerability, you can't look away now. Because the real war is just beginning. Again. Felix's voice was merciless as I picked myself up from the training room floor for the 100th time. "You're faster than any human, but you're still thinking like prey. Predators don't hesitate." I lunged at him with the supernatural speed the blood bond had given me, but he sidestepped effortlessly. Before I could recover, his arm was around my throat. "Dead. Try again." 3 weeks since the Gala massacre. 3 weeks of discovering I was becoming something that shouldn't exist. Not human, not vampire, but caught between worlds with abilities that grew stronger each day. I could move faster than mortal eyes could track. Hear whispered conversations from 3 rooms away. And sometimes, when I concentrated, I could feel what others were feeling. Their fear. Their desire. Their intentions. "Use your gifts," Felix instructed, releasing me. "I'm about to attack from your left. You should sense it." I closed my eyes, reaching out with that strange new awareness. There, a spike of aggressive intent, the coiled tension of muscles preparing to strike. I moved before he did, my elbow catching him in the solar plexus with force that would have shattered human ribs. Felix grinned, a rare expression on his scarred face. "Better. You're learning to trust your instincts instead of your old fears." From the observation window above, I felt Lorenzo's presence. His pride. His hunger. The bond between us had deepened until I could sense him anywhere in the mansion, feel his emotions like they were my own. When our eyes met through the glass, the air seemed to crackle with electricity. "That's enough for today," Felix said, reading the room with ancient wisdom. "Your king is getting distracted." I found Lorenzo in his study, tension radiating from him as he reviewed security reports. "We've neutralized 3 more hunter cells," he said without looking up. "But Cross had more resources than we anticipated. The Crimson Brotherhood runs deeper than." I crossed the room and kissed him. Hard. Claiming. His hands tangled in my hair as he pulled me closer, and I felt his fangs graze my lip. The familiar rush of desire mixed with the ever-present hunger. "You're getting stronger," he murmured against my mouth. "More confident. More yourself." "You mean less human." "I mean more you." The woman who was always there, buried under everyone else's expectations. The moment shattered when Veronica entered without knocking. "We have a problem. The Northern Covens are questioning your leadership. They say the human has made you weak." She stopped. Something in her expression shifted, and that new sense of mine screamed danger. I moved without thinking, pulling Lorenzo back just as Veronica's hand flashed forward. A syringe clattered to the floor where he'd been standing. "Traitor!" Lorenzo's voice went arctic. Veronica's mask crumbled into cold hatred. "You're destroying everything. 500 years of tradition, thrown away for a mortal who doesn't belong in our world." She lunged for the syringe, but I was faster, my hand closing around her wrist with crushing force. "What's in it?" I demanded. "Anticoagulant. Blessed by a dozen priests." Her smile was vicious. "For you, little half-breed. Let's see your precious bond save you from this." The needle pierced my throat before I could stop her. Fire exploded through my veins. I felt my blood thinning, refusing to clot, beginning to seep through my pores. The world tilted as Lorenzo caught me, his face twisted with rage and terror. "Fix this," he snarled at Veronica. "Now." "There is no fix. She's dying. Just like she should have died the moment you brought her into our world." Veronica backed toward the door. "The Brotherhood sends their regards." Felix appeared in the doorway, blocking her escape. His expression promised death. But I barely registered their confrontation. My vision was darkening, blood pooling beneath me. Lorenzo's face swam above mine, and I felt his desperation like a physical thing. "Turn me," I whispered. "It's the only way, isn't it? Full transformation." "Avery, no. Once it's done, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back." The words came out in a bloody cough. "I choose this. Choose you. Choose power over powerlessness. Turn me, Lorenzo. Make me yours. Forever." Through the haze of pain, I felt my phone buzzing. Lorenzo grabbed it, his face going white. "It's a video message. From Cross." He turned the screen toward me. My mother, bound to a chair in what looked like a cathedral basement. Father Cross standing behind her with a blessed blade at her throat. "Surrender yourself by midnight or the mortal dies," Cross's voice echoed from the speaker. "Your wife's mother for the Vampire King." Simple exchange. Rage cut through the poison fog in my mind. They took my mother. I'm going to kill every single one of them. Lorenzo's expression shifted to something feral and proud. "Then we go together. As king and queen." He bit into his own wrist, blood welling dark and potent. "But first, we finish what we started." His blood touched my lips, and reality fractured. The transformation was agony. Every cell in my body screamed as it died and was reborn. I felt my heart slow, then stop, then restart with a rhythm that was ancient and terrible. My bones reformed stronger. My senses exploded into hyperfocus. And underneath it all, Lorenzo's voice, steady and sure. "Let go of who you were. The event planner. The abandoned bride. The woman who made herself small to fit other people's dreams. Let her die. Become who you were always meant to be." Dying hurts more than I imagined. Not the physical pain, that's excruciating, yes, as Lorenzo's venom rewrites every cell in my body, but the death of who I was. Avery Summers, the girl who planned everyone else's perfect moments while her own life fell apart. Avery Summers, who let a coward's text message define her worth. That woman is burning away in this transformation, and honestly, I'm not mourning her. What's rising from those ashes is something Lorenzo's enemies will learn to fear. But here's what the vampire legends don't tell you. Transformation doesn't just give you fangs and immortality. It strips away every lie you've ever told yourself, every mask you've worn, every compromise you've made to be acceptable. And what's left when all of that burns away, that's the part that will either save you or damn you forever. I'm about to find out which. If you want to witness what emerges when a broken woman becomes an immortal queen, when survival becomes sovereignty, when love becomes literally eternal, stay with me through this darkness. The dawn on the other side is going to be blood red and beautiful. When I opened my eyes, the world had transformed. Colors sharper. Sounds layered into symphonies. And hunger, deep, primal, demanding. Lorenzo's wrist appeared before me, bleeding freely. Drink. Complete the transformation. I drank. His blood was power and memory and 5 centuries of accumulated strength pouring into me. When I finally pulled away, fangs sharp against my tongue, I felt invincible. How do you feel? Lorenzo asked, wonder in his voice. I stood, my body moving with predatory grace. Like a queen. The war room fell silent as I spread tactical maps across Lorenzo's desk. 20 vampire lords watched me, ancient creatures who'd seen empires rise and fall, and I met each gaze with eyes that no longer flinched from predatory stares. The cathedral compound has 3 entry points, I said, my voice carrying absolute authority. Cross expects us to assault from the front. We won't. Felix, you'll lead a team through the catacombs. Rashid, your people take the bell tower. Lorenzo and I go through the sanctuary roof. You expect us to follow a fledgling's strategy? Isabeau, miraculously surviving the gala, challenged. You've been vampire for less than a week. I expect you to follow your queen's strategy. Or challenge me for the title. I let my fangs descend, felt power crackling around me. Anyone? Silence. Then Felix, scarred and ancient, knelt. You're not what we expected, my queen. You're better. One by one they knelt. Even Isabeau, though her expression promised this wasn't over. Lorenzo's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. Through our bond, I felt his pride, his desire, his absolute certainty that we were unstoppable together. Not king and consort. Not protector and protected. Equals. We end this tonight, I said. And we bring my mother home. The Hollywood Hills compound looked like a cathedral, all Gothic spires and holy symbols. Inside, I knew, Father Cross waited with blessed weapons and righteous fury. Outside, I stood with an army of darkness and the man I'd chosen over mortality itself. Remember, Lorenzo whispered as we positioned ourselves above the sanctuary. You're faster now. Stronger. But you're also newer to this. Don't let rage make you reckless. My mother is in there. Reckless is all I have left. We dropped through the stained glass ceiling like avenging angels. Chaos erupted. Hunters scrambled, crossbows firing, but we were everywhere at once. I moved with speed that made me a blur, strength that let me tear through tactical gear like paper. A hunter aimed a blessed blade at my heart. I caught his wrist, twisted, felt bones shatter. Basement, I told Lorenzo, already moving. I can hear her heartbeat. The cathedral basement reeked of incense and fear. My mother sat bound to a chair, bruised but alive. When she saw me, her eyes widened with terror and confusion. Avery? Your eyes, what did they do to you? Gave me the power to save you. I moved to untie her, but Father Cross emerged from the shadows, flanked by a dozen hunters. The monster queen, he sneered. So eager to rescue Mommy that you walked right into my trap. Crossbows raised. Holy water sprinklers activated overhead. I screamed as blessed liquid hit my skin, burning like acid. But I didn't fall. Instead, I felt rage transforming into something cold and focused. You made a mistake, I said, advancing despite the pain. You thought I'd be weak because I was human once. You thought love made me vulnerable. I was moving now, faster than their weapons could track. You were wrong. Cross swung a blessed sword at my throat. I caught the blade with my bare hand, feeling it burn, not caring. My other hand closed around his throat. "You sold your soul for a monster," he gasped. "I didn't sell anything." I lifted him off his feet with one hand. "I chose power. I chose love. I chose myself. And that's something you'll never understand." His neck snapped with a sound like breaking branches. The remaining hunters fled. I turned to my mother, blood dripping from my burned hand, fangs still extended. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "Mom, I know this is—" "You're dead," she whispered. "My daughter is dead." "No. I'm more alive than I've ever been. And I just saved your life." I cut her bonds gently, carefully. "You don't have to understand. You don't have to approve. But you're walking out of here alive. That's what matters." Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. Veronica held immobile in Felix's iron grip. "The traitor. For your judgment, my queen." I looked at Veronica, who'd poisoned me, who'd worked with hunters to destroy everything we were building. Part of me, the old Avery, wanted to show mercy. But the queen I'd become understood that mercy had limits. "Make it quick," I commanded Felix. She was foolish, not evil. Misguided loyalty doesn't deserve torture. Felix's blade was swift. Veronica fell to ash without a sound. My mother watched it all, trembling. But when I offered my hand, she took it. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of our estate at dusk, watching the sky shift from blue to purple to black. My vampire sight could count individual stars, see the heat signatures of humans miles away, track the flight patterns of bats hunting insects. Beautiful, isn't it? Lorenzo's arms wrapped around me from behind. "Your first coronation anniversary. How does it feel to be vampire queen of the West Coast?" I leaned into him, remembering the ceremony. Ancient rituals and modern politics. Vampire lords pledging loyalty, while I used my event planning skills to create bridges between supernatural and human worlds. My mother, slowly accepting what I'd become, even attending the coronation though she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "It feels right," I admitted. "I'm doing real good now. Not just planning other people's perfect moments, but creating real change. The community outreach programs. The supernatural human alliances. Making the world safer for everyone. You've exceeded every expectation." His lips brushed my neck, fangs grazing the spot where he'd first claimed me. "The European covens are talking about you. The ancient council wants to meet the queen who brought peace to California. Let them come." I turned in his arms, my own fangs descending. "I'm not afraid of ancient vampires or human hunters or anything else. Not anymore. They say the first sunrise after your transformation is the hardest, knowing you'll never feel that warmth on your skin again without burning." But as I stood on the balcony of Lorenzo's estate, watching the sky lighten over Beverly Hills with my new vampire sight that could count every individual ray of light, I didn't feel loss. I felt power. Brandon's abandonment, which seemed like the end of my world just months ago, was actually the beginning. The beginning of understanding that I was never meant for that small, performative life. That some of us are born for darkness, for power, for love that defies death itself. Lorenzo found me on that balcony, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered that I was the most magnificent queen the vampire world had ever seen. And you know what? I believed him. Because I could feel it in every immortal cell of my new body. This is just the beginning of my reign. If you followed me this far, from that humiliating altar to this throne of darkness, then you know, sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is actually destiny clearing the path for what you were always meant to become. And I was always meant to be his. Eternally. Powerfully. Unapologetically. Do you miss it? Lorenzo asked softly. Being human? I looked out at the city we ruled together, feeling the pulse of supernatural and mortal life intertwining below. I miss nothing. I have everything. His kiss was deep, claiming, eternal. And somewhere in Europe, ancient vampires were preparing to test the new queen. Let them come. Avery Summers had died at an altar, abandoned and alone. But Avery Di Maria, Vampire Queen of the West, was just beginning her reign. And heaven help anyone who stood in her way.